I want to talk to you about how to get an apartment with poor credit this year, how to go about it, how to really follow the procedure so that you can get an apartment with poor credit. The thing is that if you have bad credit, everybody understands that it can be difficult for you to get a loan, line of credit, or credit card, right? But the question is, can you get an apartment with bad credit? Can you rent an apartment with bad credit? So here are the generalities I want you to think about. Landlords, one thing for sure, they want reliable tenant. Okay, that's why a good credit score can really strengthen your chances of actually be a reliable tenant. Okay, in this session, I want to explain to you what the things that you need. I mean, among other things, you need strong income proof. Let's say you have bad credit. Your credit is around 350 or 300 or even less than 400. Okay, no problem. But you need to really make sure that you can prove to the landlord that you can really pay the rent every single month. So you need to have a strong income proof. So evidence has to be strong. If you're making 2,000, 3,000, or whatever, I mean, you got to look at the cash inflow versus cash outflow. How much the rent is, the amount, and how much you are making. You also have to have a willingness to pay a substantial deposit. Okay, or you can have if you have a cosigner with good credit score, that's kind of cool. That's kind of good too. I mean, if you have let's say a family member that has a credit score around 700 or above 750, that's pretty good. Okay. Now, what credit score do you need to rent an apartment this year? It really depends on the geography where you are at and also the apartment you want to rent. But the most suitable credit score for renting an apartment is actually, in terms of FICO score, you are looking at 630, above 630, okay, 630 to 739. And for Vantage score, you are looking at 661 to 780. Now, however, if your score is in the lower ranges, let's say FICO score below 580 and Vantage score below 660, it can be really difficult to get approved, and you may need to have to actually take some extra measures when submitting your rental application this year. Now, let me talk to you about how credit impacts getting approved for an apartment. Now, the thing is, a credit check is an important part of the rental application process because landlord, again, going back to what I said, they want to make sure they have reliable tenants, okay? So the credit check is an essential step because the landlords want to assure your reliability and minimize the financial risk. So they usually assume that if the renter has a high credit score, they are more trustworthy and highly will likely pay the bills on time. Though it's not the only factor they evaluate your application on, it's an important one. So high or low credit score significantly impacts your chances of getting an apartment this year. And so what do landlords check on a credit report? Well, I'm going to put this on the screen because it's really, really important to understand that landlords go for specific things, specific pointers to evaluate your financial health, okay? So landlords will check pointers such as your rental history. Rental history is important not just in one specific geography, but let's say over several geographies, and they look at that for nearly the last 7 years, 7 to 10 years. They also pay attention to your payment history. So have you been a good payer? Okay, in terms of credit cards, in terms of lines of credit, in terms of loans. Also, they look at your past bankruptcies, if any. Okay, so they want to see how far the bankruptcy was, what happened, and also late bill payments. So if you have a history of paying your bills late, this could be a little problematic for you. Also, if you have a past due payments, this also could be a little problematic. So because the landlord wants to make sure that they get paid, right? So they'll look at your cash inflows versus cash outflows. If there are other derogatory items on your credit report, the landlord will pay attention also to see how severe that derogatory item is. If there are collections or bad debt record, this could be also problematic. And the landlord does one final thing. He or she will look at your overall debts. So your liabilities, the amount of indebtedness that you currently have. And they will, and the landlord will compare that to your cash inflow. So let me give you the specs here. How do you get an apartment with bad credit this year? Okay, one thing for sure. I just want you to remember that renting with bad credit requires some extra effort. So you have to really be willing to have a method in place. You have to be willing to spend the time, and you have to be willing to actually understand that this could work or may not work, depending on the apartment you're going after. So the first thing you want to do here is to find a private landlord. See, the whole thing is that if you go with a corporate landlord, with a an apartment manager, for instance, they have the structure in place to check your credit. But if you go to a private landlord, chances are they may not have the bureaucracy, they may not have the formality that's needed to actually check credits. Okay, so find a private landlord, but actually beware of scams. A private landlord may consider renting with bad credit, but only if you can back it up financially. Thus, you may have a better chance of renting from an independent landlord. For this, you can look online for listings on Craigslist, Facebook groups, or recommendations from a friend. You also want to discuss the credit check issue upfront. Don't let them actually realize that you actually have an issue. You want to really talk about it upfront, and you want to see how they react. You want to really gauge their responsiveness, if they're comfortable with it, or if they this is a deal breaker for them. It's actually best to be upfront about your poor credit score and the reasons behind it. Also, let them know what you are doing to improve your credit. Right? It's not just about what happened; it's what you're doing to fix what happened. So when you explain what you are doing to improve your credit, this shows you in a trustworthy manner. It paints a positive light on your situation. You also want to look for a sublet apartment. So you want to sub rent, okay? Because here, this will help you with minimal hassle, smoother move. Another effective way is to find a renter who wants to sublet their apartments, to sublease their apartment. And in that case, they will be the original renter on the lease, so your bad credit may not be a problem. The original renter will be responsible until the lease expires. However, and this is an important element, you'll still have to undergo a credit check and provide sufficient financial proof to actually get approved. So, also, you might want to think about looking into a short-term lease apartment. It's one of those things where if you are trying to get an apartment with bad credit, instead of going for the long run, the long term, like 5 years, 10 years, it's just better to go for 2 years, 1 year, maybe. Maybe you're looking for a student apartment. Okay, so build trust before signing a long-term lease. So it may be relatively easier to rent an apartment on a month-to-month or a 3-month lease basis. This way, you can prove to the landlord that you are a reliable renter by paying the rent on time. And if the landlord is satisfied, you can discuss signing a long term lease or simply renewing the lease every few months. Okay, that's kind of cool in terms of flexibility, but also in terms of possibilities. You also have, you can think about housing programs, and housing programs are great for low income individuals, for instance. So if you have a bad credit, in addition to that, you have a low income situation, maybe look into a housing program. So you can also explore the rental housing programs, and the government and nonprofit housing assistance programs may be ideal for low income individuals, such as nonprofit housing programs, housing choice voucher, in other words, Section 8. This is for families with low incomes, seniors, and people with disabilities. You have subsidized rental housing, so to help low income adults explore local affordable housing options. You also have a public housing, so U.S. citizens and eligible immigrants may also look for public housing properties for rental. You also have you have a rental assistance for specific groups. So these are special rental programs for specific groups such as veterans and individuals with special needs or disabilities. You also want to browse apartments in suburbs. I mean, this could be more accessible to you, especially when it comes to looking for a small apartment. Okay, so now credit check requirements vary in different locations. depending on the state and city where you are at, the credit check requirements might be different. So, for instance, looking for an apartment in the main city can be more challenging, especially with bad credit. So, you should consider looking for apartments in the suburbs. Depending on the neighborhood, location, and type of apartment, you may be able to get an apartment without a stringent credit check. Also, if you are trying to get an apartment with bad credit, I want you to really save a little bit because you will need a substantial deposit depending on the rent amount, but also depending on the apartment. Okay, so in this case, planning becomes very quintessential. You want to plan in advance to really to make sure that you can fulfill the requirements. Okay, now if you are a tenant with bad credit, you may often need to pay a hefty amount as security, so you should be financially prepared to at least submit an extra month's rent as a deposit. It can sometimes be 3 months. Okay, so you want to set some money aside regularly to pay rent upfront and save actually for future rent. You can also lease with a roommate or a co-signer. So basically, it's one of those things where you have greater reassurance for a landlord. So if you want to rent an apartment without a credit check, you might want to sign the lease with a co-signer, maybe a roommate, family member, friend who has good credit scores. Okay, and this way the landlord can rest assured that they can recover the rent even if you actually miss a payment, especially if you are trying to get things done like real fast. Okay, that's an important element. And one thing I also want to say here is that there are also alternative income proof and supporting documents, especially if you want to demonstrate your financial stability. So when your credit score is poor, you want to provide adequate income proof and demonstrate financial stability to actually assure landlords that you can cover the rent, right? And the following are the relevant documents you want to think about submitting. You can have pay stubs, income tax returns, the latest bank statements to actually show that you have adequate funding, reference letters from the previous landlord, letter of recommendation from your employer, preferably the current one, as a professional reference can help strengthen your chances. It's all about making sure that you can show that you are working right now, and also utility bills. So this will show a record of timely payments. And you want to finally work on improving your credit score, right? Because the whole thing is you do not want to really be in a situation where you have bad credit and you're looking for apartments all the time. So think about taking steps right now to improve your credit score. So basically, you don't necessarily have to go to let's say a credit repair agency. You can do things yourself. I mean, check your credit score, your credit report to see if there are errors. And those errors can be easily fixed if you can just send a dispute letter to the credit bureau for correction. Let me give you a few hacks here. So if you want to get an apartment with bad credit, let me talk to you about how to improve your credit score before getting an apartment. Okay. Number one, as I said, you want to monitor your credit. You want to really monitor your credit report. Just monitor the report. And so when I speak about monitoring your credit report, you have the ability to go to annualcreditreport.com, or you can have an app such as Credit Karma that allows you to monitor your credit report on a consistent basis. Okay. And simultaneously, you want to improve your financial habits. It's one of those things where if you're monitoring your credit report and you're realizing that you are around 300 or 400, and you're trying to really bring it up to 600, 750 or above, and you do not actually adjust your financial habits, this could be a little problematic. You need to identify the negative items on your credit report to know what next steps you need to take. You also need to really pay attention to the errors. You want to dispute the errors. So if you see wrong or inaccurate information on your credit report, this can be a cause for concern, especially if those errors are affecting your credit score, let's say in an adverse way. So in this case, you need to take immediate steps and raise a dispute along with sending the relevant proof. Make sure that you have the relevant proof so that the credit bureau knows exactly that you're not really playing games with them. And you also want to pay on time to improve payment history. So, as you know, payment history can be an important element when it comes to your credit score, when it comes to your credit report. So, you want to really improve your payment history. You want to also reduce your CUR. So, CUR stands for credit utilization ratio, and so you want to really you want to reduce it. So, the lower the better with CUR. So, anything below 30% is actually seen as positive from a credit report perspective. So a high credit utilization ratio can quickly make your credit score drop. And you also want to see if you can have other strategies in place to actually improve your credit score. So let me give you a few extras here. So if you are trying to get an apartment with bad credit this year, you have to really understand that your options might be limited. But as long as you have a clear idea about the apartment you want to go for, the geography you want to really target, and also most important, whether you want to have a roommate or you want to live by yourself. As long as you can really clarify those things in your own head, things will be a little easier for you. Okay. You also need to make sure that you plan your finances in advance. So a little bit of financial planning will be really a key here. And you want to save. You want to put money on the side. You want to accumulate some funding. Okay. And it's one of those things where you have to understand that the more money you have, like a sitting in a savings account or checking account, the better your chances of actually landing an apartment with bad credit. Okay. Now, a credit check is often part of the rental application process, but not all apartments check credit scores. And so it depends on the geography. As I said a little earlier, renting midtown versus in the suburbs, things could be a little different. But overall, if you think about what's the average credit score that you might want to have to get a good shot at having an apartment, 670, 650, 670, okay? And so landlord wants to make sure that you are reliable as a tenant, and that you don't have like a credit score that's really too low. One thing for sure, if you have a 500 FICO score, you can still qualify for an apartment, but it will be difficult to have an apartment with let's say good tools, okay, good conditions, if you will. And you can also reapply for an apartment after you got denied due to bad credit, because a rental denial usually does not appear on your credit report. So it's possible to reapply for an apartment after you get denied. However, the approval chances depend on the reason for denial in the first place. So if the reason was low credit scores and you haven't worked to improve them, then you can apply after you reach the ideal FICO range, let's say around 630 or even above. So here's a quote in today's conversation. I explained to you how to get an apartment with bad credit. I gave you the generalities, the specs, the hacks, the extras, and now the coda. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.